All right, welcome back to the shop. So in this video, I'm going to assemble the transmission portion of this transmission for a Cat 735 articulated six-wheel drive haul truck. In the last video, I reassembled the torque converter and the pump drive unit, which is sitting right over there. And then in this video, I'm going to assemble the transmission. They call it the Planetary section is what they call it, but it's basically all the clutch packs. In the last video, I did not go over this piece here, however. This is clutch pack number 1, and I did film it, so I'm going to edit it into this video, but I didn't put it in the last video because it's not part of the torque converter, but it does mount to it. Funny thing is, this small clutch pack, it's so small, and this clutch pack is used for, like, I think it's 2nd gear through 5th gear or 6th gear or something like that. The truck weighs 70,000 pounds and it hauls 70,000 pounds, and all that weight's on this clutch pack and one other, and then also on the lockup clutch in the transmission. But you know, I've never had that number 1 fail on these, which is weird. We have, you know, these other ones with you know, full-size clutches. Let's see, you know, with full-size clutches with full packs, we've had these wear out and fail. So the way this transmission works, for any one gear that you're in, it has 2 clutch packs that are engaged. It's never 3, but always 2. And so it's just, there's 6, it's an 8-speed tranny, and there's 6 clutch packs. So it just uses a combination of any 2 clutch packs to lock up to produce the gearing that they want to put out the tail shaft. So a while back, I did a video on tearing down a 735 transmission and a torque converter. This isn't the same one. That one I put together. That one was such a mess when I took it apart. It took so much to clean that thing up and to source the parts, because some of the parts weren't available anymore. I couldn't find them anywhere. It took so much work to get that one back together. I couldn't film it, and I had to get it out for my customer because he needed to get his rock truck going. But I did have, so I bought 2 transmissions a while back, a few years back, for parts. They were complete transmissions, very low hour on them, around like 800 hours on them. And one of them I took and rebuilt, and that's in the truck now that this transmission came out of, that I'm rebuilding. And then the other one I was going to rebuild and sell it. But I decided to scavenge it for parts because there's parts that I just can't get anymore for these. Sometimes you're lucky and you find a used one, you know, in Italy or something like that, or somewhere around the world. But very hard to get some of the parts. So that last transmission actually used some of the parts out of it. So what I decided to do, since it was so low hour, almost all these parts are the transmission I bought for parts, or that I took apart for parts, and all these parts are from my old transmission. And this old transmission has been rebuilt probably 6 or 7 times. The truck itself that this one belongs to has 26,000, 27,000 hours on it right now. This one here is like under 1,000. So these parts are like brand new in this thing. The clutch discs, they're still like brand new condition, the bearings, everything. So basically I'm resealing it, and I'm just inspecting everything as I go along. The only thing I did find wrong was a broken dowel, which is kind of odd. I've never had a broken dowel on one of these transmissions before. Let me see if I can find it. So here it is. This one dowel was broken. I don't know why, but whatever. I've got extra parts so now. So, and then there's one section here that is from my old transmission, because my really cool new one I sold to the guy for the other transmission. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and assemble this now. I've got all the parts laid out in sequence, and then I'm just going to start assembling it, just piece at a piece, you know, one piece at a time, and we'll build this thing up. It's going to stack up about this high, and then when it's all assembled, it's going to get mounted onto that pump drive group, and onto the, you know, to connect to the torque converter that's in there. So let's get started. There's bearings in here. It's kind of 2 races and then like a plastic bearing or nylon bearing, and it's brand new. That thing is, I'm telling you, this thing has like no hours on it. So actually these can sit inside here. So we just set those, I don't know if the camera just picked that up. We set these inside here. Go steel, nylon, steel, and then we'll set this hub back over, make sure it sits down all the way, and then we can restack this after I check out these discs and plates. So we'll put them back in the same order. That plate looks really nice. Drop that in there. These discs are like brand new. really nice buying some that has just 0 hours on it, I'm telling you. Usually everything I deal with has a lot of hours on it. Come on. Come on. Here we go. Yeah, and then this end plate right here is a this retainer is the last plate. Good, there's just no wear on that thing. Brand new. So we'll just wipe that off. Make sure it's clean. Set it in here. And then we will put the ring back in, the retainer ring. And that's it. All right, so I'm going to do this video just a little different than I normally do. Normally I'm holding the camera and I'm filming as I go, but this one I've got you guys set up on a tripod because I've had too many guys complain that the camera moves too much and it makes them seasick or something. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, I'm just going to start stacking this thing and I'm not going to look back. So if I need to stop and talk about it, I will. But other than that, I'm just going to film the whole thing and then I will edit it so it's not boring. And yes, I'm going to use the CAD assembly procedures. It's just a good thing to do. I've done over 30 of these things, but I still use this assembly procedure just to make sure that everything goes in and goes in properly. All right, so it's starting out, it's already got this manifold on here. It's not a big deal that it's still on there because there's nothing in there. It just bolts to it. There's a bearing in here, and then there's a metal ring here, seal ring. And that, I've already gone through that seal ring. That's already a good ring, and this bearing checks out. It's almost brand new, so there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to skip ahead, and it's already on. It's already torqued, and we'll just skip to this first step here. We're going to install gear number 101 into the carrier. So this is the gear. The bearing inside there's all good. I already checked it out. I mic'd it out. And it's got this thrust washer on top. I've got it greased up and stuck in there already. So that slides in there. And this has a bearing inside of it right here, and that bearing's in good shape. Already ready to go. And here's that ring, that plastic ring that I talked about. It has to be set in here, and it has to be pushed into place. If you put this in wrong, it'll grind this up, and you're going to get all that material in your transmission, you know, in the valves and everything. And I've seen it happen before, so you got to be very careful to make sure that's in there right. I use a real tacky grease to hold it in place. It's just so it doesn't come out of place. Before I set that on there, I got to double check, make sure the steel ring is connected. It's got a little latch here, or like an area where it overlaps and connects. And I got to try to center it up as much as I can because it's just a small bevel on the back side of this carrier that'll push that in. So we got to make sure that's in place. And I just got to line up these gears as we go down. And then you can feel it when it sits home, and you can tell that it didn't hurt that ring. Because if it popped that ring out or broke that ring, you would feel it because this wouldn't sit down right. And it's in there good. I feel it sitting down home, and it rotates okay. And so now we're going to check the rings on this other one. In fact, I'll take this ring off. I'll show you guys what that notch looks like. So it's got this. I hope the camera picks this up okay. And those lock together like that to hold it in place. And then when it's in place, you know, with the other unit over it, it'll be compressed like that. And it's just a seal ring to keep oil from flowing where it shouldn't flow. You kind of want to direct the flow. If one of these was missing, the thing would probably still work okay, I guess, but it might not get proper lubrication or cooling somewhere. Okay, so we got that in place. I put that tacky grease to kind of help hold it in the groove because they want to spring outward. All right, and then the next part that goes on is this ring here. This is a ring that will actually ride inside of to hold the discs in place. That the discs will ride on when the discs go in. They go into that spline. So we lower that down over these gears on the Planetary. sit in just like that. So the service manual doesn't show which way that gear goes because there's a recess inside, but if you look at the parts manual, I just look on SysWeb on the parts manual, it shows that the drawings are actually very precise. They're real accurate, and it shows which way to put that gear on. So you need the service manual and the parts book or SysWeb or whatever to make sure you get that in there correctly. All right. And so this one starts with a disc because there's not a piston there. There's actually a wear surface here for it. Usually when there's a piston, they put a steel plate against the piston so you're not wearing on it. So we'll go to this. And then the plates, just look at the picture real carefully of which way the plate goes. And on these ones, it's going to sit this way. All right, so we got that. We can continue just stacking this thing. Just want to be careful that you have a plate and a disc separated every time by a plate or a disc, and that these plates are in the correct way. And then you also want to make sure you have the right count too, the right amount in each one. That's backwards. Oh, that's the end one. Disc, and then this last plate's going to go on separately because I believe it goes on top of the springs. Yeah, so next we're going to put in these dowels. So we've got these all stacked up. We're going to put in the dowels, and then we're going to put the springs in there. All right, so these dowels are going to line up with the cutout notches in the plate. In these particular transmissions, there's always 5 springs in a pack, and there's always 5 dowels. All right, and there's little recesses down here for the springs to sit. So I'll set the springs in. And then I gotta put these long dowel rods in here. These are over here at that other section because they get pulled apart. Pull them out as I'm taking the transmission apart. Got these rods here. All these rods do is they go through the whole thing, and the springs right on these dowels. These will keep the springs from popping out. Alright. And then this top plate's going to go reverse of the other plates because it's going to sit on the springs. And I believe on the dowel rods. Yeah, and on the dowel rods. I actually should have put the dowel rods in after this, I guess. Would have been easier. Okay, so we're going to put this on backwards. Grab the camera in a second to show you. You just gotta make sure that these things, you go through the plate, then you go through the spring, you gotta make sure it sits in the hole. So you've got this big beveled kind of hole, and then there's a smaller hole in the center of it for these. And you just wanna make sure that these things are dropped all the way in that hole. Otherwise, later on down the line, when you go to close this thing up, you're gonna be squashing one of these things. You probably end up breaking it. Grab the tripod here, show you guys how it sits in there. So all the other plates went on this way with this hole here over on this side, and they stacked up. And then the top one, it's going to sit on the spring and on that dowel. And what that spring does is it releases the clutch pack from being able to grab when the piston retracts. It kind of pushes the piston back, and so that's why that sits like that. So next would be the O-ring. I've already got the O-rings in all these. I greased them up and put them in the grooves. They kind of want to pooch out sometimes. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they do. So you really got to keep a close eye on them. And just before I lay the next manifold housing on there, I always double check that the O-ring didn't pop out. All right, before I get the crane out and get that hooked up, this is one of the pistons that pushes down on the pack, and it goes into that number, well, that'd be number 3 and 4 manifold housing. I'm going to center this up as close as I can, just by eyeballing it. And then when I lower that manifold housing down onto it, I just have to make sure that this thing is going in correctly, and it'll sit right down on top of that piston. We just got to rotate it to make sure it's in the right direction. And we'll just slowly get it right over these dowels. And it's a little bit fiddly trying to get all these dowels lined up just right. All right, so that went on there nice. The O-ring behaved, stayed in place. It slid down on the piston real evenly. And now it's just dropped right into place. So now I want to double check these dowels, these long ones, and make sure, like you could feel them drop into that center hole. I just want to double check those because you get a lot of movement in those when you're lining this up. And we go ahead and pull these link brackets off. And then I've already got a new O-ring in here. This top piston's already in place. All right, now that this number 3 and number 4 manifold housing's in place, we need to put that next Planetary unit in there. So let's go ahead and set that in. Before I set that on, I need to make sure that this steel ring is latched and that it's centered up in place. And then there's 2 of them here. There's the smaller one and the bigger one. So we need to make sure those are where they belong, so that this thing will hopefully slide over them without breaking them. It's one of those things that you can't tell once you assemble it if one of those is broken or something. You just got to kind of feel it when you assemble it to see, make sure that it feels right when it goes together. All right, that went in there. That felt really good. Let it slid over there. Okay, now we need to put that drive gear 80 and then put those dowels in place, and then we can start stacking discs. Make sure the drive gear is set down where it belongs. Okay, now that we got that drive gear in place, we could go ahead and install these dowels, and then we'll be able to put the plates and discs in for this clutch pack, for clutch pack number 4. Okay, so install drive gear and dowels, and then install the first steel plate over the dowels and steel rods. So this first one's going to go in differently than the other plates. Make sure the piston's right. Yeah. So this one's going to ride on the piston, and if it's a rebuild, if it was new plate you wouldn't know, but since it's a rebuild, you can see the marking on one side of the plate that was riding on the piston, and you can tell the other side where the disc was, how clean it is. So this first plate's going to go over the small rods, the rods that hold the springs, and it's going to go over the big dowels, ones that hold all the plates. Because this one, that one goes this way, and then all the other ones are going to be flipped. They're going to be the other direction. So let's go ahead and stack these discs and plates. So that's one disc. And these plates don't go over these spring dowels, they just go over the regular dowels. If these were new discs, I would have to soak them in, I could put oil down on them, I'd soak them in oil. But since these are used, they're already impregnated with oil, so I don't need to bother. All I gotta do is make sure they're clean and just stack them back in. I also mic them too, by the way, just let you guys know, so that they mic out at the proper thickness. Okay, so there's the last disc. Okay, now that we have all the discs and plates in place, I'm gonna go ahead and drop the springs in. Okay, we got all 5 of those in place. We're gonna go ahead and set the number 5 clutch pack housing, the manifold housing on. We'll double check our O-ring. I've already got a new O-ring in there. It's greased up. It all looks really good. So we'll set that down. We just got to thread it over these dowels, and it'll sit down on top of there, and then we can go ahead and start building pack number 5. So this one only weighs about 80 pounds or something like that, so it's not a big deal. And the way it sits under, it kind of leaves room for your fingers, so you don't have to worry about getting your fingers pinched. Not so much. All right, so that's sitting down on there. And then this is the one that has those 2 screws that hold this down. When you're disassembling these things, these holes, they used to be filled with oil. And the first one we took apart, we couldn't figure out how to get it apart. And the service manual didn't show them. And after that, not too long after that, they updated the service manual to show these screws. So it's got these 2 Allen screws that sit in here. And they hold this manifold down. I don't know why. I guess they figured it needs it. Otherwise, some of the discs might not line up on their spline. So that's all assembled. Next thing, we're going to be putting this ring in. This ring's going to sit down and line up with the spline inside there on that carrier. And then inside here, this one here gets these steel locks. So this number 5 Planetary ring gear gets these lock plates that go in there, and they've got these Allen screws that go in. So here's what those locks look like. There's a ring and a groove inside this ring gear, and you kind of lift up on it a little bit and slide these into there, and then these screws will index in place in the correct place. Okay, so after doing that, then we've got this ring that goes on here. Got a piece of dirt on there. We're gonna go ahead and grab the number 5 carrier, and we're gonna set it right inside here. And these Planetary gears are gonna have to line up inside that ring. You gotta watch your fingers, make sure it all turns good. And then we're gonna line up these splines here because we're gonna be sliding discs over those. So, and this one here, there's another one of those nylon rings inside of here, and I already have it in place. And it's another one of those ones that you have to make sure locks into place in the right position. This actually ends up splining into the number 1 clutch, which is over there on the torque converter. Drop that in place, steel plate down, and the first one is going to sit on the piston. So we look and see, you can see where the piston was riding before, and then it's going to go over these spring dowels. So these small holes are going to go on the spring dowels. This one goes opposite of the other plates in this stack. Okay, so we got plate, then we go with the disc. And then we get a plate, and this plate's going to go backwards to that first one. Then we get a clutch disc, then we get a plate, and then we get a clutch disc. We're going to put in these 5 dowels, and we're also going to put the 5 springs that go in here to retract that plate, or retract the pack. Okay, so we got 5 dowels. Okay, so we're going to drop the springs on. Spring dowels. And then we've got our O-ring in there already. It's greased up, it's all clean, it's looking good. Next we're going to be putting the reaction plate on. So this reaction plate, this is the new style one. It's made out of steel. It's actually forged out of steel. The original ones were cast, just like the rest of it, but the cast ones would break. They would crack all through here. The last transmission I just disassembled, the video I did on disassembling that other one, it had the old style plate still, amazingly, after all these years. And it was cracked all through here. So this is the new style one, the steel one. So we just got to line this up, and it's kind of fun to figure out how to line it up. The first way is to figure out the dowels, because it's got 2 dowel holes on here, and they go in these holes. So hold it right here, and then you can see it's got oil ports through here the way it's cut. And if your dowel holes line up and those oil ports line up, then that's how you're going to put this on. So then this is going to slide over the clutch disc or clutch plate dowels and over the spring dowels. It's going to sit right there on that O-ring. So this reaction plate actually has a clutch pack that pushes against it here. A clutch rides on it here, and a clutch rides it on the other side. I guess that's why it's called a reaction plate. And it gets a lot of torque. That's why they were breaking before. All right. Plate, or I'm sorry, disc. Plate, disc, last disc right there, and then this last plate's going to sit on all the dowels. So it's going to sit on top of the springs, all the dowel holes lined up. And now I just got to put this O-ring in here, and then this rear housing is going to go on. There's the metal seals on here, and I've got them greased up really well. You just double, triple check, make sure they're centered as good as you can, because they're going to go into here and into here, and there's just the slightest of a bevel in there for them to drop into. And if these break when you put them in, you'll never know it. There's just no way to know. It's kind of stupid that they would design it that way, but I guess that's all they could do, I guess. Section here. We'll double check the O-ring, make sure the O-ring's in the groove all the way through still. the washers that go on the bolts, you have to put a sealant that they put on there. It's a sealant that dries. It's like a flexible gasket maker, and you just coat the whole washer with it. And then when you drop the bolt, then you go ahead and bolt it down, and that'll keep it from leaking out of the bolts. So I've got to just clean that crust off of there. And then what I always do is I just take all the old washers, I just throw them in my bolt bin and use them on other stuff. And I just put new washers on because it's not worth my time to clean the washers. And the washers are really cheap. It's just a few dollars for all these washers. All right, so here's what I seal up these washers with. First I clean that all off, and then I sprayed some ether on there to get any oil off of them. Then use this cat gasket maker, the One Uniform 8846, and I'll just coat all sides of these. I'll lay them in place, and then I'll clean up the bolts, and I'll drop the bolts in there and then tighten those up. So before I do that, I'll get the ether and I'll clean these up. I've got to get all the oil off. I'll just get a glob of this stuff and just mix it up all around here. Get these coated really liberally. The only time liberal is a good thing is when you're putting sealant on these washers, all right, guys? So. Okay, now that I've got the shoulders cleaned up on these bolts, and go ahead and drop them in place. Okay, so this unit's all assembled now, except for the number 2 clutch. All right, let's set these down on this rag. One of the dowels just flipped up and fell off. So that surface looks really good. Lay these down over here. Put that dowel back in. So we've got this clutch disc, which looks really nice. Just stack that on top of there. Just reverse stack all this stuff. That way if it's all good, we just put it right back how it was. This thing only has, like I said, 800 hours or so on it, so not expecting to find anything wrong. Always have to inspect these. This was a weak link. The old original ones were a lot thinner, and they would break off either here at the spline or they'd break off at the hub. So they came up with this thicker one, and you have to change about $6,000 worth of parts to go along with it. The only problem is the sticker one, when it breaks, I've had it break right across the middle at an angle, and then it twists up in here and wads up, and it destroys all those parts anyways. Hit it again in a second. So these are the seals, the plastic seals that go on that hub down there, and these seal against onto this number 2 clutch unit. These nylon seals, what you do, I grease the crap out of them, and then you want to hold them like in a close circle like that for a little while, and it'll kind of shrink them so they're overlapping, and that way when you put them in there, they'll stay in tight. Because if you don't do that, they'll sit on there and they'll spread open like this, and when you go to install that clutch unit, it's going to pop that seal off, and then you're going to have a lot of problems with your transmission. Got the number 2 clutch unit ready to go. Slide it over this shaft. Here we go. And yeah, that's in all the way. Then it gets this fiber washer and this snap ring right here. Once we get these on, this transmission will be ready to sit onto the torque converter. That snap ring's in there, the thrust washer's in there. When I go to pick this up, this thing is going to slide down a little bit. It's going to hang down. It's just the way it is. All right, so if you see this spline right in here, and then this spline here, this inner spline here, the bigger one, it goes over the hub on the number 1 clutch unit, and then the other spline, the small shaft, goes in here. Okay, so I've got all the seals right here for this that go in this gear drive. if you look in the parts under SIS or in the parts book, you're going to get the old part numbers for all these seals. But if you look in the service magazine articles on this transmission, you're going to find that they have a chart there with new part numbers for some of these seals. And what they are is they're seals that can handle the heat a lot better. Because the original ones, they would get so hard and start leaking, you know, around 3,000 or 4,000 hours. I mean, depending on what kind of temperatures the truck's working in. And these ones here, they're a lot more expensive, but they last the length of this transmission. So next thing, I just need to put these bolts in all the way. There's bolts all the way along here. This is going to come in from the bottom. And then I need to come in to this backside. And the pickup screen goes in here. I pop that in. It gets a bolt that retains it. And then this cover is going to go on. It gets a gasket. And then we'll change the O-rings on a couple of these plugs that are sticking out. Put the oil filter in it. Put the cover on that. And then we'll be able to pick it up and set it up on its bottom. And then I'll go ahead and mount all the valves and modulators and all that stuff. I'm not going to bother showing all that stuff. I think this is enough for this video. Otherwise, this video is going to be 2 hours long. So anyways, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it if you guys hit that like button. It really helps me with YouTube so that they, you know, understand that people are interested in the content. Then they'll share it more so more people can see it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell if you want to know when my videos come up. Usually once a week, not always, but sometimes, you know, for the most part, once a week. And anyways, you guys, thanks for watching.